Hey guys, Core here. Welcome back to Drop or Not welcome back to Drop or Not Short Shows Blitz Mode. As you can see, slightly better production values. Of course, the humming of my computer fan probably doesn't improve things too much, but this is hopefully a bit less nauseating than my constantly shaking camera. So let's jump into it.
So what I've got here is a randomizer, and I've listed all the short shows and ONAs and OVAs that seem to exist online with subtitles and also are not just like an advertisement. So that's what this is. So let's randomize it to mix things up. Here we go. Alright. So it looks like first up is Fumikiri Jikan.
So I've now completed the 11 episodes currently released of the 12 episodes to be released of Fumikiri Jikan. It's fine. I mean, it's nothing. It really is like a nothing show. It's really easy to watch. And it didn't really bore me, but it didn't especially interest me either. It's basically like a bunch of little vignettes with a couple two-parters, and each episode is 3 minutes with a 30-second opening theme. Basically where all these characters arrive at a crossing stop, or like train crossing, and there's just various types of interactions, generally with a comedic and romantic is that the right word, tinge, to them? And I mean, it's just kind of fine. It's just a fine show. Like it made me laugh like once, or it wasn't even a laugh, it's just like a moderate chuckle. Like it's not very funny, even though it's generally like trying to be humorous. But it's not obnoxious. Like it's easy to just chill. It's like it feels like just watching, like, I don't know, YouTube videos to burn away time. It's in the same way, it's very easy to consume, but it's not really gonna make much impact on you as a result of that. Soundtrack is pleasant enough. Occasionally it gets a bit too, like, the audio balance, like there was one episode in particular where the soundtrack was just way too loud and it was like kind of distracting. But there's like another track, I think it's on the one where with the sexy girl, which will make sense if you watch it. There's like this jazz track that sounds like straight out of Twin Peaks that I like. But I mean, like, nothing about it is memorable at all. So but it's not like offensive or anything. So like it's the most 5 out of 10 series you'll ever see. So yeah, on to next.
Now we have Asagao to Kase-san. Let's see how this one is.
Alright, so I just finished watching, well, not just, I'm recording this after the fact, but I gotta keep you immersed in the sense that it's like an everyday, like, I'm like right in the moment with you. Yeah. Anyways, I watched Asagao to Kase-san, and it was delightful. I'd say, just throw out my score right off the bat. Strong 7, maybe a 7.5 on this one. That's how much I liked it. Very good. Could have been better, but unfortunately there were some elements holding it back. But to start off with, like, what I really liked about it, so this story tells, it's a romantic, like, shoujo-ai between Kase and Yamada. And like at the beginning of the story, they're already in a relationship, but it's new. And then they like tell us like how they got together, but like most of it is about them in this relationship through like the last period of high school, prior to college. And what particularly appeals to me about this OVA, because it's a one episode self-contained story, 50-ish minutes, is the presentation. The presentation is top notch. like it's very, very, very KyoAni, but it definitely has its own spin on it. The director for this is he also directed Ichigo Marshmallow, did some work on Steins Gate, Ni Under 7. He has a pretty impressive pedigree, I'd say. He's been working in the field for a while, and he's worked on a lot of good stuff. Um, and it definitely shows. Though there's definitely a lot of stuff that feels very KyoAni about the way it's directed, it still has its own unique style to it. Um, and for one of the things I really like is the delightful watercolor backgrounds, and these are very light watercolor, where it's like a lot of the scenes you can see the watercolor bleeding into the white background. It's very light color palette, lots of light blue, light green, occasional red, orangish red for the sunset, um, and the general it's very nice looking. And what I particularly like is the variety of the shots to express stuff. There's some really, really great moments scattered throughout that are just like impressive that would be here. Like I just wouldn't expect shots of this caliber in this like type of story, or that like I've literally never heard of before, and nobody's really talking about this OVA at all. I imagine maybe in the communities that like these types of shows, it might be discussed more, but at least like from my reference point, I haven't seen any discussion of it at all, and I definitely think it deserves it. Um, for instance, there's one really great shot where they're talking, and it's basically like the one character says something and then turns away, and so and they're like, I think they're drinking from a water fountain or something, and they're in front of a mirror. Oh yeah, it's like a washroom type thing. They're in front of a mirror, so you can see one character. They're talking to each other, right? But the camera just cuts it off so that you have the one character here, the mirror is behind them, and there you see the reflection of the back of their head. But then you also see in the reflection the other character who's off screen, and that way you can see their reaction to the surprise. It's just a really well crafted scene, and a really interesting way to convey the moment that works, I think, really well. Um, and there's all sorts of stuff like that. Even the way, like, the two main characters have very unique interests. One character is very sporty, and the other character is much more girly and interested in gardening. And that's really well reflected in the design of their rooms, and the like shot composition. I don't know if I'm using that word correctly. Basically, the every shot when they're first introduced is like a different angle of their room, and you can really get a sense that this room is like a fully fleshed out space, and that the creators of this OVA put a lot of thought into everything that was in there and how that would reflect their characters. And it really does reflect their characters. It's a lot of little touches like that. There's one fantastic sequence where she's sort of like Yamada is like sort of emotionally distraught, and she's like grappling with some self-doubt, and it's like this sort of like dream sequence, and she's like in this like ethereal, like watery type of space, and it just has some great animation. Like all the animation's very expressive. um it's really delightful. I quite like the character designs. They're not 100% my tempo. The eyes look a little off. Like, not, it's like a stylistic thing, but to my taste, it's not quite what I would want. It looks a little bit too like, I'm trying to think of an example, a little too like mid 2000s style, um, which the way they draw eyes in a lot of mid 2000s anime, I'm not the biggest fan of. But outside of that, it was really well done. Okay. soundtrack was pretty good. This is the composer for Madchen Marchen, which I watched one episode of, but I don't really remember the music. Here, the soundtrack I would say is pretty good, and it's almost there. It's got all the right like surface elements because it's a style that's very disparate, like you know, underlying harmonies in the strings and this like spaced out piano melody theme that's very simple but accessible and beautiful, much in the vein of like Wolf Children, or what's another example? I guess The Silent Voice would be another example of a similar style. Um, but it really does feel like it's lacking identity. Like, I don't know. The tracks on themselves, I'm always like, that's nice, but it doesn't really feel like it's really bringing out the scene's emotion as much as it could. And it doesn't feel quite as like there's nothing in it that really stands out, and it's like, okay, I'm here, like I'm contributing to this OVA having its own unique identity. Um, and my so yeah, it's good, but it could be better, and some of the that's like the more like story character elements. That's kind of how I feel about all of that. Like the main two, like they're cute, but their interactions, like we don't see very much of them just interacting. So for me, it was hard to be as engaged in their relationship, especially towards the latter sections where there's more dramatic tension, because I'm like, I barely know what the people are like besides the fact that they love each other and one likes sports and one likes gardening. That's pretty much all I know about them, and I would have enjoyed seeing more of their just like friendly interaction because they do have a nice like dynamic. Um, I just wanted that to be brought out more. Um, and added on to that, I feel I had a hard time finding the reasons that the OVA brings up for dramatic tension to be very reasonable or believable. Especially at the end, they have to have the big like running, I'm running after you, wait, stop before you go moment. And it just felt really forced and unnecessary, and I don't know, it did not work for me. So that's like my biggest problem, is that when it tries to go for those more hard hitting moments, I feel like it hasn't really earned the payoff it's going for. But as I said, presentation is fantastic. Like I'm giving you very like surface level stuff because this is supposed to be a shorter thing, but I'm already going on way too long. But yeah, visually it's really excellently put together, and that alone like bumps its score up pretty high in my book. So definitely worth a watch. I would recommend it.
So I had Kuroneko Monroe listed on here, but it doesn't seem to exist anywhere online, so gonna have to give up on that one. So we'll be moving on to number 4, Isekai Izekaya Koto Aiteria no Izekaya Nobu. Alright, let's see how this one is.
If you're wondering where the wall scroll went, I accidentally knocked it down and too lazy to put it back up. So I finished the first episode of Isekai Izekaya, and it was pretty nice. Definitely a mistake to watch this show while hungry, and I'd say it's kind of hard to pass any like judgment, um, because it's not really trying to be like a amazing narrative or anything. It's really just a show, at least from the way I see it, it's a show to watch while you're eating or while you're cooking. Um, it's very much styled after like, you know, cooking like food. It's highlighting these different foods, and they are like, oh, that's so tasty. And then it just happens the gimmick is that it's people from another world coming in to try these things, so they're even more impressed by the great food. And then the last 5 minutes is like this like IRL footage of this Japanese chef preparing like fancier versions of the dish that's in the, or at least I think they'd say like his own spin on the dishes in the show. So like it's nothing special, but it's nice. I would watch while eating lunch. So I'll hold on to it for a bit.
And we're only at number 5. Might have to make this more than one episode on short shows. Well, up next we have Ni Tian Shen QI. Let's go.
Alright, so I watched about 7 minutes of Woden. How's it even pronounced? Woden Tian Shen QI. I don't know how to pronounce Chinese stuff, so probably butchering that. But yeah, watched first 7 minutes, and it was like not good. I mean, it wasn't particularly like in your face bad, but it definitely felt amateurish. Particularly the animation left a lot to be desired. And that's the main reason I'm dropping it, is that the animation is pretty subpar. What, like, the moment, like, the defining moment where I was like, yeah, I can't do this anymore, is this guy's, like, picking on this girl, and he takes money from her, and then he goes to put it in his jacket, right? Like, he's kind of tucking his jacket, all cool, like, and it, like, and he's, like, folding the money up. And first off, the fold animation is super gimpy looking, and then it, like, teleports inside his jacket. I'm like, okay. And this is the first episode, right? You know, the one that's supposed to be like, this is what you should expect from us. Or more like, this is, like, what we can do. And, yeah. Not too stellar. Also, it's really weird to watch something that's anime, or like, does this count as anime? Like, is this considered anime by most people? Like, I mean, I'm not too up in arms over the definition of anime, but I'm just curious why these Chinese shows tend to be considered anime by most people, whereas like more Western productions aren't. But hearing this style done with Chinese vocals is just so strange. It's not even like bad, it's just, it is strange to my ears because I'm not used to hearing that. I don't really watch much Chinese productions either, so it's like I'm not listening to Chinese very often. It's an interesting sounding language for sure. I will say I feel like this is just going off of what Chinese stuff I have seen, because I have seen, you know, a couple foreign films here and there. The voice acting doesn't sound good, and it's really hard to say because I don't want to act like I'm like, oh, because it's not Japanese, it sounds bad. But it really doesn't feel like they're capturing the characters very well. So yeah, it's not very good. So I would pass.
Okay, Usagi no Matthew and Amai Tobatsu both don't seem to be subbed in English, so gonna go straight on to Wakaokami or Shougakusei.
Alright, I finished the first episode of Wakaokama ga Shougakusei, and wow, that was actually very enjoyable, and perfectly shows the reason I wanted to do this series in the first place, because I would have literally never checked the show out if not for the fact that I was just trying to watch literally everything. So the premise is essentially this: little girl Oko is going to, I think it's like a inn or something like that, that her grandmother runs to stay with her grandmother because her parents died in a car accident. And on the way there, and when she arrives, she meets this ghost boy, and that's pretty much the premise of the first episode. And basically the first episode ends with her sort of ending up somehow accidentally saying to her parents, to her grandmother, that she wants to help out and become a young mistress. And because the episode's short, like 10 minutes. Like I'm assuming they probably air them in 2 episode blocks, like most children's shows are aired. And it was really just a good time. Directing was solid, like it's not like stand out or anything, but all the characters are really on model. And when I went and checked the studio, I was like, oh, it's Madhouse. That explains a lot. That's why the production, I was like, this is really, really solid visually. And I like the character designs, especially Oko. I like her expressiveness. She's not like exaggerated expressions or anything, but they're all just delightful. It's delightful. Her character, somehow I was sold on it from minute one. Because there's a brief sequence in the first 5 minutes or so where like she arrives, because we see her coming on the bus, we see her arrive, and then we see her like go to her new room, and then there she starts to cry while thinking of her parents. And I was like, wow, I'm like actually feeling something here, and I barely even know who this girl is. It worked really well, and I think part of that is the soundtrack is really good. Even just the first song immediately had my soul. There's heavy emphasis on like the, xylophone binging along, while there's like this more like rich undercurrent of the strings. It works really well. Yeah, it's delightful. I like the comedy's fun. The characters are cute. The main girl, like, especially, I really like her, and her voice work stood out to me as being really endearing. And I checked, and it's actually a real child. Like, depending on your definition, it's a 14-year-old girl who voices the main character. So, something a little closer to the character's actual age, and the VA does a really, really great job being the character. So, I would actually recommend this one, especially if you are more into like lighthearted type of like children show type of stuff. Like if you liked the Leighton series that's also airing in the spring onwards, like if you enjoyed that, this is another type of show, kind of like in that similar style, if you will. But yeah, I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Now we have Aggressive Retsuko, or Aggretsuko, I believe. I've heard quite a bit about this one, so be interested to actually watch it for once. It's a bit boring if I do the entire thing from one angle, isn't it? Well, I finished watching Aggretsuko, and it was quite enjoyable. It's a very, nice little short show, 15 minutes an episode, 10 episodes, very easy to knock out, and pretty cool, pretty good. I guess first off I'll list like the stuff I enjoyed about it. I really like the main character Retsuko. She's just very likable, and there's plenty of stuff. Like it's weird because I don't really relate to her per se. However, like I know people who are like have been in similar situations to Retsuko, so it's sort of like I relate vicariously, or I guess like I have a greater level of empathy for her because I know like real situations. Like her boss is like that. There's people like that. There's a lot of people like that, and not just in Japan. Yeah, it's kind of weird because I wouldn't describe the show as being necessarily outright funny. It's more so the general situations have a level of humor to them, but it's almost like, I would say almost similar to like I'm not good with like sitcoms or anything. So the close comparison I can draw is The Office, where it's like this general like sort of awkward, uncomfortable atmosphere that creates this like tense, humorous type of thing. But it's not moment to moment constantly like giving you straight laugh out loud moments. At least not for me. Uh, Now I'd say The Office is definitely more in that range than Aggretsuko, but that's like the closest comparison I could make, coming to the top of my head. Um, yeah, and I was honestly more invested in it for the sake, like, I was interested in the characters, and I wanted to see where the story would go, more than just, like, I thought it was all that funny, because it really plays it pretty straight. We see their day-to-day interactions, and of course, over every time it gradually builds up until she reaches her snapping point and she has her heavy metal. And that's like I think that's the best part. Like the premise is just really really strong, and I love the metal scenes. Like, I mean, I don't listen to metal music, but it was dope. I liked it. It was really fun. I listened to a little bit because I have a friend who's more into that type of music, and I occasionally go to concerts with him. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I really like the musical sequences. That it really gives you that catharsis, because they don't play it so much for laughs. Like, you feel the tension that Retsuko feels from her day to day life, and as a result, when you get that release, when she gets that release, you feel the same release. I did feel like towards the latter half, I don't know, it would require some more thinking, but I did start to get the sensation that the show is pushing a message that I don't know if I agree with, where it's basically sort of encouraging her to continue to be complacent with her work life, and just, continue to exorcise her stress through her music. Um, there's a couple of scenes, like she's talking to one of her friends who's much more carefree, and she's like, "Oh, people like you, Retsuko, who are responsible and hardworking, you make it possible for me to live life the way I do." And then there's also like a scene where her boss, who has previously been characterized as being like a gross, sexist, horrible, literal pig, uh, is like, he gives her like kind, like, advice, and it's like a heartfelt moment. And there's various scenes like that where it makes me a bit iffy, because I'm like, I don't know, if I want them to be. It just feels a little wrong, where they're presenting this really, unmistakably, inarguably wrong situation that Retsuko is placed into. Her bosses and her like head boss and her other bosses are uh, discriminatory towards her, as in they tend to single her out for stuff. They often go far out of their reach. Like, the office workplace situation she's put in is really shouldn't be considered an acceptable situation, but it feels like the show's kind of just saying, deal with it, we'll get through, which is pretty nihilistic, and uh, kind of feels like propaganda almost. So that's just something worth musing on. But I mean, outside of that, I was still like very much interested in the characters, and particularly, Retsuko and her friend she makes along the way. It had a pretty sweet ending, as well. Though, again, it's like they sort of like, it felt like they established a really strong premise, and then as the show went on, they played it more and more straight, particularly towards the end, where it felt like it sort of had turned into a very normal story. I don't really want to spoil too much, but that's the best way I can describe it. It felt very normal by the end. Um, yeah, but I mean, I still liked the ending. I still liked elements of it. but there's just these various elements that made me feel a bit iffy while I was watching it. And secondly, so the music is great. Heavy metal scenes are awesome. Just one small note: there's a couple times, particularly in like the first 3 episodes or so, where it feels like the music is like a bit too loud or just not really fitting the character, just in like the day-to-day scenes. But other than that, the music was good, and there's a lot of great tracks. Like this would be good music for like the background in a video or something. It's what I feel like it would be really well suited to that. Just like the instrumental tracks. The animation was not too great. It's flash animation. There's a lot of like motion tweening and stuff, and various sequences where it like there's little like animation errors and stuff. They're not too noticeable, but they are there, and generally it doesn't look too great motion wise. However, I feel like it does somewhat make up for that because it has a very, very strong aesthetic. I mean, these are like characters, like the Sanrio brand is pretty much based off of having, this strong aesthetic character that they can market through toys and games and shows and etc. So, like, of course, the aesthetic is really the strength of the show, I'd say. Especially the heavy metal sequences generally almost always look really great. So that works out. It's sort of a wash between the two sides of the coin. But yeah, that's my thoughts. Like speaking it now, like hearing my thoughts come out, it's like it feels like I'm being pretty negative towards the show, but ultimately I'd say it's more like it just felt like it had something more unique to offer at the beginning, and as the show went along, it felt like it more started to fit into just the regular mold that every other show is. Like it felt like the show was like a metaphorical representation for Retsuko getting pounded into the typical everyday office worker. Man, this sounds horrible. I'm sorry, everybody. But I mean, I like the actual experience of watching the show was enjoyable enough. I'd probably give it a 6.5. I'm leaning towards 6.5 on this one because mainly because the metal sequences work really, really well. If the show didn't have that, I feel like it would be much weaker. I mean, of course, that's part of the core premise, but like what I'm saying is the show could have functioned without that as just a normal show, and you could sort of swap that out with just her being annoyed or whatever. But like that element of the premise, I think really makes it work a lot better. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on Aggretsuko.